Hello, everyone. It's very nice to be here. Where's the clip? This one is. Right. It's my first time at AWE, actually, so it's really nice to be here and meet everyone. I should probably introduce myself. My name is Muadh Al Kalbani. I am a web standards technologist at Samsung Research Institute in the UK. I specifically specialize in XR within our team. So our web standards team essentially works on either developing new web standards for the web platform or maintaining existing standards. We also have other people within our team that focus on other areas like privacy, accessibility, WebRTC, and other areas as well. And all the work that we do really is focused on supporting our main internet browser, which is Samsung Internet. That's the logo over there. So my talk today is about XR accessibility barriers. At first, I really want to give you an overview of some of the key results from previous research that looked into XR accessibility barriers. And then I want to zoom in into one specific barriers type called barriers to entry. And then after that, we'll discuss the role of the web. And then finally, I'll tell you how you can get involved in helping us develop better standards for a more accessible WebXR future. XR accessibility barriers is a very hot topic in research, be that in academia or in industry. It's been heavily researched, and it's still being very heavily researched. There are many, many barriers that have been found out in previous research. We're not going to go through all of them because we don't really have the time for that. But they could generally be grouped across these three main categories: software, hardware, and ethical barriers. The software category includes barriers that are linked to XR software, so anything to do with the immersive experience itself, like the way it looks, how you navigate within that experience, the quality of the rendering. Anything to do with the software aspect can go underneath the software category. The hardware category includes barriers that are linked to the actual physical XR devices and technologies, so the form factor, the way it looks, the color of it, how welcoming it looks, not just the weight of it and the form factor. It can actually go beyond that as well. And then the ethical barriers is an interesting one because most of the barriers in the ethical category come from historical problems that people with impairments have faced or societal issues that they faced over the years. So the challenges in the ethical ones are mostly linked to fair use, user protection, and the affordability of XR devices. So I'm not going to walk through all the barriers. I just wanted to give you some examples for each category, some of the most famous ones, so you probably have seen these before. In the software category, we have sickness triggers, which you probably heard the term cyber sickness or motion sickness before. Sickness triggers could be anything from the color scheme of the environment changing all of a sudden, or the speed changing all of a sudden. The floor beneath you in a VR environment would move without you actually knowing. Anything that could trigger sickness, really. And then you have experience customization, or the lack of customization that you have in immersive environments. So if you're not really able to customize the immersive experience you're in, if you're not able to slow it down, change the color scheme, or remove virtual objects that are not necessary, then that could become overwhelming and present challenges. Assistive technology support is another one. As you may well know, people with impairments depend on assistive technology to get by their daily lives and their work as well. That could be a cane, it could be a hearing aid, it could be even eyeglasses could qualify as assistive technology these days. If you're not really able to use your assistive technology while using XR, that could be problematic. It could be overwhelming for people with impairments because they lose that connection with reality that they depend on. This is getting much better with current devices now, especially with eyeglasses. So you can use devices with your eyeglasses now mostly, but there's still a lot of work to do with other devices like hearing aids, for example. Hearing aids can cause a ridiculous amount of feedback when you wear an XR headset on top of them. That's just one example of the work that still needs to be done. In terms of hardware barriers, there's the one-size-fits-all assumption. So one controller design works for everyone. One device design would work for everyone, which is not really the case. So customization, even on a hardware level, could go a long way to cater for more user preferences. The form factor, which I mentioned earlier, is also important, so the weight of the device, how comfortable it is to wear. But like I said, in research, interestingly, this actually goes beyond the weight and the comfort. So different colors would be nice. The way it looks, how welcoming it looks to actually wear and use can go a long way as well. Alternative inputs. So again, this is something that's getting better in XR devices now. So instead of just having the classical controllers, we can also have hand tracking, speech recognition. But this also refers to being able to switch between those alternative inputs and pick the one that's most comfortable for you while you're inside an immersive experience. That's really important. If you're not able to do that and you can't use the controller, you probably, people with impairments would stop using the technology. In the ethical category, like I said, most of these are derived from historical issues. So the financial affordability, historically, people with impairments earn less during their lifetimes in comparison to able-bodied communities. So they're not really able to even afford XR devices, which again, it excludes them from this technology and limits their access to it. XR literacy is another one. Again, it's a historical problem of a digital divide between people with impairments and able-bodied communities. So they don't really have the necessary knowledge and expertise to get XR up and running. This could extend to their support network as well. So if you think of someone with an impairment living in a care home or a special school, if the people taking care of them don't have that knowledge as well, that again makes this a problem of limiting their access to XR, even though it can hold huge potential for them. And then protection measures. Protection measures is one of the kind of common concerns across impairments that people have when it comes to XR. So how are they going to be protected once they do partake in XR or share a virtual environment with others? This problem is kind of derived from the issues that we have at the moment when it comes to social interactions or social media, like cyberbullying, harassment. The common concern here is that these problems would migrate to virtual shared spaces as well. So these are just the general groupings of each one of all the barriers from like previous research. But I also wanted to highlight that it's not just about the general categories. There are also specific impairments for each impairment type. So just to give some examples for the physical category, you have involuntary hand and eye movements, which is something that's unique to physical impairments, which makes it almost impossible to even wear an XR device securely. And then in the cognitive impairment, fast and unexpected movements, if they are an immersive experience, that can get very overwhelming and would lead them to stop engaging with XR. In auditory impairments, lip reading challenges is one of the biggest issues. So because we don't really, at the moment, have avatars that can provide high fidelity for high quality lip reading, they're unable to use lip reading in immersive environments, which hinders their user experience. And then for visual, inaccessible menus is probably the biggest issue that's faced by people with visual impairments. So if they do actually make it inside an immersive environment, but they can't find the menu, they can't engage with the experience and they can't engage with others in the case of sharing an experience with other people. So those are just the general, so those were just the kind of all the barriers or the general groups from previous research. But I just wanted to zoom into one type of barriers, which is called barriers to entry. Excuse me. So barriers to entry are quite unique because we don't really think about them that much. So barriers to entry can be defined as the challenges faced by users before they engage with XR technologies or as soon as they start using them. So if you think in the context of wearing an XR device, this is the kind of challenge that you'd face before even buying the device or as soon as you wear it on your head. Those are kind of, these challenges creep up during those two stages. The impact of barriers to entry can be significant, so it can hinder the user experience, but in the worst case scenario, it can break it completely, and it can stop your engagement with the technology. So just to explain this better, I want to walk you through some scenarios for some personas. Please note these are not real people, but the scenarios are based on the actual research. In this case, I just picked some generic steps for using an XR experience. So you'd wear the device securely, you turn it on, you launch the experience, and then you'd interact with the experience in the end. Alice, in this case, has involuntary arm movements, which means she can't really get past the first stage. So she can't wear it securely, which means she never really gets to the stage where she even visualizes what the environment looks like or make use of it. So her experience stops at that first stage. Another person, Bob, I switched up a little bit here to use a mobile-based experience to just show you a different kind of barrier. So you access the smartphone, you navigate to the browser, you launch the experience, and then you interact. They're able to access a smartphone, they're able to navigate to the browser. When they launch the experience, they get a notice saying, you need a VR viewer to be able to make use of this environment. They don't have access to one, and that's it. Their experience stops at that third stage, and they never get to interact with that experience. One last one, bear with me, sorry. So I switched it back to wearables again. So again, this is a person that requires customization of immersive environments. So they're able to wear the device securely, able to turn it on, launch the experience. As soon as they enter the experience, it gets overwhelming. It's fast moving. They can't really keep up with it, so they have to take off the device, and that's when their experience stops. The reason why I included this is because just to highlight that it can also happen, so barriers to entry can also happen as soon as you enter the immersive experience, not just before. So if you're thinking the scenarios, the two previous scenarios are a bit extreme, it can actually happen also as soon as you enter that immersive experience. And this person is me, actually, just a twist for you. I found out the hard way that I can't really keep up with very, very immersive environments. I've been using AR and VR for 10 years now. I am comfortable in wearing a VR headset. I can engage with others. I can communicate with others. I can complete certain tasks. But if the environment is very, very rich in visuals, if it's very fast moving, if it's a full-on game where I have to throw things using both my hands, I would fall straight away, face down on the floor in about 3 minutes, so I have to take the device off straight away. The reason why I'm sharing this is just to highlight that this could really happen to anyone. It's not just for people with impairments. Anyone is prone to this happening to them. So if you design for accessibility, you're really designing for everyone in this case. So what does the web have to do with all of this? I think I may be a little bit biased because of my current job, but the web holds great potential when it comes to mitigating some of these barriers. So I'm sure you're aware of the WebXR device API, which is a W3C spec that's been developed and maintained by the Immersive Web Working Group. I've recently joined the Immersive Web Working Group after joining Samsung, and it's been this amazing effort that has been going for over 10 years now. It's essentially a specification that allows you to deliver your XR experience over web browsers. It's supported in most web browsers, if not all the biggest ones now. On top of this spec, you have all of these amazing frameworks for development. These are just some examples of these frameworks. There are many, many others. So I'll just provide examples like 3JS, A-Frame, Babylon.js, and others. But there are many, many others that they can use. They have great communities, these frameworks. They have free plans. They have templates, documentation. You can ask whatever you want. So they have some great communities around them, making it so easy for developers and companies to get started with their WebXR journeys. And then the last piece of that jigsaw is the user, which is essentially your target audience here is anyone who can access your web page that hosts that XR experience. What I really like about the WebXR device API is that it has this endless feedback loop. So everyone here really has a voice. Everything that happens in standardization happens in the open. So the WebXR, the Immersive Web Working Group, it has representation of all the biggest manufacturers of XR technologies. The developers of the frameworks can provide feedback on the spec. Even the user can provide their feedback on the spec if they have any concern. And this endless loop makes the WebXR device API better and better as time goes by, because everyone really has a voice in a way. So how can it mitigate some of the barriers that I mentioned? I'm kind of glad Zapar did a presentation before, because they had some really good points on why WebXR is useful and mitigates some of these barriers. Instant access is one of the biggest advantages of the web. It kind of removes any unnecessary steps for the user to take to access an XR experience straight away, which works really well for everyday users that can have different contexts when using XR technologies. Say, for example, someone is shopping and their shopping trip only lasts 5 minutes or 3 minutes. They're asked to scan a pack that takes them to an XR experience. They can, if they're doing it using the web, they just have to scan it, and suddenly they're in that XR experience. If they were asked to take any extra steps, they wouldn't really have the time, because it doesn't really suit their time-limited context in this case. The second advantage is guidelines and standards. So the web is highly standardized to a very high degree, and the standardization efforts is also continuous, so it keeps going all the time. W3 standards they're authoritative, they're internationally recognized. They also provide a very strong foundation for other frameworks to be built on. So all the frameworks that I mentioned in the previous slide are built on top of the WebXR device API. And finally, the last advantage, which is, again, kind of my favorite thing about the web, it's the openness of it, the open communities. Everyone has a voice when it comes to standards. And this kind of removes any barriers for everyday users to contribute to the specs. So you can probably tell by now, I really care about accessibility. I've been lucky enough to work in a few accessibility projects in the past, and I really appreciate accessibility can sometimes get a bad rep, unfortunately. So it can be seen from a company perspective, it can be seen as an extra cost. From a development perspective, it can be seen as extra work, and I've been personally a victim of that before, thinking that it is extra work. But accessibility is really about understanding user requirements. It really is as simple as that. It's about understanding our users better, to build better experiences, more relevant experiences that doesn't hinder their user experience at any point. It really is as simple as that. I've read 2 amazing quotes from the World Health Organization that said, in the 1950s, disability was considered a personal trait, but in our modern day and age, that's not really the case. Disability now is contextual. So anyone, depending on their context, could really have a disability. So if you're designing for disability, you really are, for accessibility, sorry, you are designing for everyone and building for a much wider user base. So finally, this is kind of my open invitation for you. We'd love to hear from everyone when it comes to the WebXR device API. If you had any feedback, if you think we're missing anything in terms of features, if you have any feedback on the way it functions at the moment, again, like I said, everything happens in the open in these standards, so you're more than welcome to provide your feedback through the official channels on GitHub and the actual website. One extra thing I added here is the XR Accessibility User Requirements document. So this is an amazing document created by the APA working group at W3C, which provides guidelines for all the 4 impairments that I've covered in this presentation for XR usage. So if you are in a position where you can't really do your own user research, you really can't go wrong with checking the XR Accessibility User Requirements document as a starting point to give you all the guidelines that you need for developing for accessibility. But as you can see, it has been last updated in 2021, so we can really use any feedback you can provide to update it and make it better. And I think that's everything from me. I'll put the 2 links there if you want to check them out, and thank you.